Who was the roast with the most, the most roast, the roasty most, the mostly roasted, whatever. It's yancha. Hi, this is Dimitri from nannuoshan, dedicated to the spread of fine tea and tea culture worldwide. Today, this very day, in fact, we are about to drop a bunch of new Shui Xian on our online store. That makes, I believe, the last of the yancha that we've sourced this year. We've sourced a bunch of new yancha due to popular demand, particularly in some of the higher quality and therefore higher price categories. A bunch of new exciting Shui Xian with really fantastic, great flavors. But it makes it a good opportunity to review the breadth of the whole category, which can be surprisingly large. So today I've chosen our, not what we're just releasing, but a kind of average Shui Xian, or just Shui Xian on the store, along with our Bishiyan Rougui, kind of two ends of the yancha spectrum. The idea is to take a look at the extremes of this field and to get a sense of the breadth that it can have, and also the role the roasting can play in the flavor. So without further ado, let's begin. I should note that, a little bit confusingly, this is Shui Xian, the cultivar, often used for Wuyi Yan Cha, also known as rock tea, or more accurate translation, cliff tea. That is not quite the same, but it's maybe sort of related to the classification, the kind of quality classification Shui Xian used in Dansong Oolong. It could be that those cultivars used for Dansong they supposedly do come from a mother plant called Shui Xian, but it may or may not be the kind of a Shui Xian, and genetics of plants, and this is going back a couple hundred years. It's a long story. Anyway, two things to keep apart. We at the moment do have two, both on our online store. So if you're looking for this Shui Xian, look for the one that is listed as a Wuyi Yan Cha, and not the one that is listed with the Dansong Oolongs, even though technically it's not Dansong Oolong. Otherwise, a digression. It's a pretty middle of the road example. It makes a good one for the purpose of this video, and Shui Xian tends to be roasted in the lighter end of the spectrum, and the cultivar itself is a little bit kind of lighter. The Rougui, on the other hand, is a bit of a stronger flavor naturally as a cultivar, and it often tends to be roasted higher, and this one has a distinct roasting, as I recall. Of course, those are names for cultivars, and they could ostensibly be produced in any way, but those are kind of common practices, and makes a good makes for a good perspective for this video. So I've chosen here, these are tea taster guy ones of 100 milliliters. I've chosen 4 grams, around 4 grams per 100 milliliters, a little bit more than we usually recommend of 3 grams per 100 milliliters, which gives you kind of a nice, even average brew. I want to bring out some of the aromatics, particularly on these first infusions, as I'm probably not going to go through all of the infusions for this, and I want it to be a nice comparison. If you want to take a look at the leaves side by side, the Shui Xian looks a little bit larger right now. The Rougui, a little bit either more tightly rolled, or slightly more, a few more broken, maybe the ones I've pulled out here, but both pretty similar. The Shui Xian, at least I can perceive a little bit of a green edge, but we might notice that with the wet leaves later on. I have 90-degree Celsius water prepared. That's approximately about 195 Fahrenheit. And for 3 grams, our usual recommendation is brewing times of 45 seconds, 1 minute, 1 minute, 90 seconds. So I'm going to go kind of by sight a little bit less than that to get a good brew. That makes, it says 90, okay. Los geht's. That's German for let's go. Nice even pour here. It's always a joy to pour off the water that way. They're definitely off. This won't take long. By the way, if you enjoy this content and would like to see more videos like this, consider giving this video a thumbs up, a like, and maybe even subscribing to our channel, where there are new tea videos every week. And that should do it for a first infusion, about now. Nice, robust looking color. For first infusion, if you want something a little bit lighter, more aromatics, you could probably even do less than this for this amount of tea. But we're gonna see what that gives. Color-wise, pretty similar. Aroma-wise, a roastiness coming off there, but sugar, and something a little bit indefinable, but definitely kind of a little bit sugarcane, a little bit brown sugar. Brown sugar is one of the flavors that I like in yancha, which I think it sounds a little bit not very refined brown sugar, but this kind of middle molassesy sweetness that can come out is really quite enjoyable if it's in a good amount in proportion with, of course, other flavors and aromatics. Rougui, on the other hand, boom, okay. Like dark chocolate and red fruit and more of this roasty character. That's what I recall from this. There's something else beneath there. Almost a little bit in the direction of something creamy or milky, but more like, hot milk or something coming off there. It's really nice. The fruit could be berries, like blackberries, but more like cooked blackberries. Yeah, like a blackberry compote. Makes me blackberry compote. Had a good blackberry in a very long time. And let's move on to tasting the first infusion. I'm going to start with the Shui Xian. Now there is something creamy, a little bit milky, maybe rather. Not very creamy in the texture, but in the flavor, it's a little bit of milk, and riding on that is this kind of very typical like Wuyi flavor. It's a something roasted, but a little bit vegetal, but a little bit fruity. It's a really nice taste. And it makes for, I would say, quite a balanced tea. After that first wave of flavor, it kind of sits back on the tongue, kind of hangs out. The aromatics starts sort of steaming up into the olfactory epithelium, and you're getting, okay, some more steamy aromatics. There's also a distinct minerality here, which is something that's often attributed to yancha, and here it's definitely present. In terms of the strength of flavor, despite the color, which is, again, the color is about the same here, it's fairly mild in the tongue, almost no bitterness, maybe like, sort of a toe of bitterness, like just this amount. You can tell how much that is, right? Just a touch. That remains, and a little bit of astringency, but also not yet so much. To that, it's almost a bit like zucchini skin, but just a little bit. Rougui, on the other hand, what does rougui have for us? Deeper, not a very intense brew, not very bitter, not really bitter at all. Well, no, maybe there's a touch there. Again, actually, it's kind of the bitterness that you get from like bitterness, a bit of astringency that you get from like eating a blackberry or berry or something and biting on one of the seeds, a blackberry or raspberry, or the bitterness that comes out in fruit. The roasty edge is noticeable, but it comes out here in the aromatics more, which is kind of, for me, a sign of quality. I personally, I like sometimes a smoked tea, but I don't really like a very acrid roastiness that goes kind of, it's a sensation that almost shoots kind of back into the nose a little bit, or sticks in the back of the mouth or on the tongue. And sometimes I like it for a minute or two, a little bit, but it almost gives me a headache sometimes if I drink too much of it too quickly. And here, the roastiness is definitely present. It's been roasted, but it's more of a residue. Put it that way. It's a roasty residue, maybe a little bit of a smoky roasty residue. It's worth noting that these are harvested at a little bit different times, and presumably produced and roasted at different times. The rougui is from April 2021, and the Shui Xian is from sometime in the spring 2022. So about a year old. They've both each had a little bit of time to rest and reduce any of the kind of mellow out any of the treatments that they've had, the processing, but the rougui a little bit more. The leaves still smell quite intense, in the direction of kind of also cocoa powder, chocolatey or liqueur. In the mouth, it's pleasantly mild enough, I would say. I do want to try one more infusion to see how it develops. But the other thing to notice here is kind of we're doing a similar tasting at home, is the feeling, there's the mouth feel, the texture element, but also kind of the locus of the flavors, where how you experience them in the mouth, where the feeling it gives the body immediately afterwards. Which it is tea with caffeine and it's hot liquor, so that's one large element. But there seems to be something to each of the different teas, and you may get a different bit of a body feeling depending on you and the moment. Now, I'm talking a lot about roasting here, but it's maybe not the main only way I want to point out to experience or define yancha. Everybody's done a nice video called "What Makes Yancha So Special." Yes, that's the title. In which I think he gives a very good definition or description of the characteristic flavor of yancha. And spoiler alert, it's not the roasting per se. So I'm talking a lot about that as the different characteristics, the kind of extremes of yancha for particularly for these teas, but it may not be the only thing, the element that defines the flavor the most, if that makes sense. The other thing is that particularly after a couple of years of mellowing, of resting after the roasting, it seems to provide not merely just a roasted flavor. You can think of anything roasted or a little bit of smokiness, but also transform the flavors, bring out maybe this fruitiness, this sweetness. One can well imagine some kind of browning reactions, depending on whatever phytochemicals are present and can allow certain kinds of browning or caramelization to take place. I'm not really sure about offhand and don't want to speculate too much. But at least it wouldn't surprise me at all if some of the sweetness that comes out in yancha and a lot of the more caramelly flavors do come from the roasting process, which aren't a roasted flavor per se. When tasting, it's worth kind of noticing what's beneath, even if there is a strong roasted flavor or aroma. So I'm going to kind of toss back the first infusion. I'm just going to get a sip of the second to be able to report to you, my faithful onlookers who smells maybe, well, watering if you don't have tea in front of you. I recommend making tea while watching tea videos. It's nicer that way. More vegetal than the first one. A little bit of a seaweed flavor is emerging. It's probably also worth letting tea's general cool down a bit. And there's also a disclaimer about sometimes the flavors that come up in the very first infusion or even coupled infusions are not always characteristic of or representative of the tea as a whole. Yeah, a little bit of that more kind of umami. That's interesting. I didn't expect that so early. But there's still some of this, detectable if you're looking for it and thinking about it as roasted. There's some of that present, but it's very background. It's almost this kind of afterthought, back of your mind kind of thing. Here it's manifested as quite smooth, but the body has kind of more to it. A rounder body, still more of this kind of chocolatey, fruity direction than this one here. And the aftertaste, distinct note of charcoal, which I rather like. I like charcoal, but sort of too much of the roasties, the pungentness is what I find overwhelming. Here it's just perfect. If to compare this with a sort of over-roasted yancha, that's not on the table at the moment. I'd rather not do that comparison, and I'm not sure that it's representative of the quality per se. There are probably other dimensions we could explore here, but I think this kind of has something of a spectrum to it, and at least, if not the complete ends of the spectrum, on opposite sides of the spectrum. I think it's worth doing similar comparisons on your own between these different cultivars, different levels of roasting, and also thinking maybe even about different ages, maybe more dramatic age differences compared to these, in which the tea has had more time to settle and the flavors to develop over time. Not so much that they become aged, there's kind of a aged flavor that starts to develop, but something that allows one to have this more freshly roasted taste versus when that's kind of evaporated and you get, or sublimated as it were, and you have something beneath that is maybe more delicate anyway. And paying attention in general to the flavors, the aromas beneath the roasting, and also particularly the texture or mouthfeel and the kind of corporeal feeling afterwards is a really interesting experiment. I think I'm going to call that a tea session for today. Do try on your own. Let me know what you think. And I hope you enjoy some of the new Shui Xian from us or wherever you get your quality Wuyi Yan Cha. And I will see you in the next video, or you might see me. We could see each other. Till next time. Both nice. Next thing's gonna be some dancong. That's what I'll have.